Hello, welcome to the LIVEcast from Speak Life. We hope you can hear us. We hope we're not just talking to ourselves down here in the bowels of the Revival Prayer Centre. Oh, that's fantastic. I think we are. So I need to mute myself, and it looks like we're going live. Hello, if you're joining us. Looks like nobody is yet, but
we've lost all our viewers already in our first minutes.
Yes, sorry. Last week we mentioned that we had a steam-powered laptop, so we went out and we got a new laptop, which may need to be replaced next week.
The joys of technology.
The joys of technology. We shall see. But we're calling this the LIVEcast.
Yeah, we had to think through all the names, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
And we figured, what with the podcast?
Yes.
We could go for live for this one, because it's live. It says something about what's happening,
There's a lot of
and we are
thought.
casting things out there.
Now, did you know that broadcast, it kind of has a very biblical origin, in that the parable of the sower...
Yeah, this was news to me.
He was casting the seed broadly, and this is what all broadcasting is doing. It's meant to be sowing the seed of Jesus out there in the world, so... that's what we are doing. We are broadcasting the life of Christ, hopefully. And our big idea is we're going to talk about what's new with Speak Life, what's news out there in the world, and we will discuss our video, our thorny question that we release on the Monday night.
Yeah.
So, Paul, what is new at Speak Life?
What's new? Well, we've just had our next video in our series come out yesterday. So if you've been following our Thorny Question series, I think we started back before Christmas. And we ran a few then. We ran one last week on hypocrisy. Hopefully you've seen that and enjoyed it. If you've not seen it, you can find it on our Facebook page or you can find it on YouTube. But then yesterday, we had our latest video out, Post-Truth. Mm-hmm. Where we were thinking a bit about that, and you can find that on the Facebook page if you've not seen it. We think it's going to be on YouTube. Well, it will be on YouTube if it's not at the moment. So we're gonna get that up there.
You know what I'm going to do right now, live? I am going to post yesterday's video as a comment. Boom! There it is.
Wow!
It's out there.
Wow!
Okay.
This
cool.
is like,
can we live post-truth?
It's like breaking news as it's happening, isn't it?
It's news to me. I'm a complete Luddite when it comes to this.
So, post-truth, we're going to be talking a bit about that later as part of this, as part of our livecast. And then, Glen, do you want to talk a bit about your book that you've got coming up?
Okay, yes, a bit of shameless self-promotion.
Absolutely.
Do I want to do that? Yes, I do. So I've got an Easter book coming out called Divine Comedy. What is life? Is it a divine comedy? Is it a human tragedy? Mm-hmm. And it was sparked off by the fact that Easter is happening on April Fool's Day this year.
Right.
So 1st of April, April Fool's Day, and that actually taps into a long history of holy laughter, that actually Easter was a time when people would tell jokes. And it used to be limited to that one Easter Sunday sermon. Now vicars get up there and tell terrible gags all year round.
Yep.
Sorry about
Absolutely.
that. But it used to be this thing where you'd get kids to come up and they'd tell jokes on Easter Sunday because this was the day when the devil fell for it. What a fool! Ha ha! He thought that this was going to be Jesus' death, and it turned out to be Jesus' victory. Wow, Yabu sucks poo to you. And so that was the holy laughter thing. And the big idea with the book is sort of saying that Easter is the ultimate comedy, because comedy is not really about whether there's laughs or not, whether there's gags. Comedy really is about
a few TV programs that follow that rule as well.
That's right.
It's not about being funny.
Yeah, sadcoms. Not sitcoms, but sadcoms.
Sadcoms.
Yeah. Dramedy.
Dramedy.
Yeah, it's like a drama, tragedy, comedy, all fused together.
Nice.
But
Rom-zom-com.
Rom-zom-com.
Yeah. All the classics.
Yeah, and if you're a sort of a comedy purist, you sort of think, well, they're kind of washing their hands of the impetus to actually make people laugh at that stage, because they're just saying, oh, that wasn't meant to be funny. That was the tragedy side of things. That was the drama side of things.
Right.
Anyway, comedy is meant to be, classically, comedy is shaped like a smile. That's how you can remember it. You go down into the pit and you rise up on a high. And so, even though it's a story that begins in pain, it ends in joy. And that is your great comedy. Tragedy is the exact opposite, shaped like a frown. You go up into joy, but you tumble down into the pit. And so really, like when you go to Shakespeare and you ask, which are the comedies, well, it's tricky in that, like, you open up, Hamlet, and there are jokes in Hamlet, apparently. My English teacher pointed them out, assiduously, and I sat down and wrote down in my notebook, apparently, Hamlet is telling a joke here. Who knew?
No. Yeah.
But just because he's telling a joke doesn't mean he's in a comedy, because a comedy is about the ending.
Sure.
And at the end of Hamlet, the death count is astronomical. Whereas, for all 14 of Shakespeare's plays that are comedies, it ends with...
Happy ending.
Happy ending, which is a specific happy ending.
Oh, is there a wedding?
A wedding. And sometimes there are 4 weddings.
And a funeral?
No. See, a funeral's a tragedy. So that would be dramedy, wouldn't it? Richard Curtis was doing dramedy.
And an airport chase.
Yeah.
That's how the Bible ends. Chase to the airport.
And only one man stood in their way. So, what is life? Is life a tragedy or a comedy? Like, you'd think it's a tragedy because it does end with a funeral, right? Like, none of our lives end with weddings, our lives end with funerals.
Yep.
So isn't life a tragedy? Actually, your one shot at a comedy is the story of Easter, where Jesus plunges down into the pit, rises up again. He takes your tragedy, gives you his comedy, and that's the idea for Divine Comedy. And
nice.
Yeah, it's going to press now. And
so when's the book going to be out?
Well, on the website it says like the 1st of March, but it might be out sooner than that.
And I'm getting dragged across the room.
Yeah.
Where can we get the book?
10 of those.
Yeah.
So go to 10ofthose.com and search for Divine Comedy, I guess.
Sorted.
Search for Scrivener. Although the danger with that is you might end up buying one of my wife's books, which, that's actually a good book. It's actually well written, and who wants that? So that's what's new with us.
So that's the new stuff.
Yeah.
And then what's news? So think a little bit about what's going on in the news. Something hopefully we're doing this week by week. If there's stuff going on.
Yes.
And it appears there is stuff going on.
Apparently. I'm not a racist.
So,
I'm the least racist person you have ever interviewed.
Yeah. So if you've not picked up on it already, we've got this big thing at the moment going on in the news. I say we, it's across the globe.
It's not
really,
ours.
Isn't it? It's not
we
ours.
Didn't
vote
for
ours. No. So Trump has made these comments about certain countries and referred to them in a certain way. We've
call them hellholes.
We've written hellhole countries.
We'll
That's
say
not the
hellhole.
phrase he used.
Yes.
I'm sure you can find out yourself if you really need to know. And it's caused a lot of uproar, basically, hasn't it? And the big accusation levelled at him has been that because he said these things, it's because he's a racist.
Right. And the countries at issue were because the countries at issue were like Haiti and some African countries, and he called them hellhole countries. And therefore, what's interesting is that, like, the first thing that I thought when I heard him make those comments is like how rude, how crude, how ignorant, how very unstatesmanlike. Like, this is nuts. This is not how. If you were interviewing for the job of president, this is not the language you would use.
Or really any job, really.
It's true.
Yeah. Even if regardless of the interviewing,
right?
If you're in the role, generally
clear your desk.
Yeah, we were saying you wouldn't say those things.
No.
And not expect to
yes.
face some discipline.
Yeah, of
really.
some kind. And yet, what's been fascinating to me is that there's a real push to identify these completely unacceptable comments, and they are completely unacceptable, but there's a real push to label them as racist. And I just find that interesting, that whether we're going to get upset about this or not depends on whether we think there is a racist intention in the heart of Donald Trump or not. And I'm not sure, A, whether we can establish that, and B, whether that's the criteria we should be using.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting. I don't know if anyone is actually watching, but
let's have a look.
If anyone is actually watching, it'd be interesting to know maybe in the comments whether you think that what he said is implicit. Is that the word I'm looking for?
Implicit racism?
Implicitly racist. So the fact is it implicitly racist? So my as we've talked about this here, we were saying what he said could be racist but he could equally have said those things and then not be racist things. They'd be rude things, outrageous things, unacceptable things to say.
Yes,
but not at their heart necessarily racist.
I could call. Let me pluck a UK town at random. Here we are in Eastbourne, so I could call Hastings a hellhole. Like I could.
Well, man,
and you would understand what I meant if you've ever been to Hastings, right? But like, it's still another. You've still got to establish that that's motivated by. Who knows what that's motivated by? Like, I've been there. That's what it's motivated by. No, I'm serious. We love you in Hastings. Love you. But you could call any number of places a hellhole for any number of reasons that go beyond the issue of race.
And people seem to leap on it, didn't they, and say this is wrong because it is racist.
Right.
But we were saying here, imagine if we could establish some kind of test where we could know definitively whether he intended it out of racism or not.
Right.
Let's say we could do the test and it came back that it wasn't out of racism.
Right. It
would still be wrong, right? Like, surely, I mean, we wouldn't go, oh, that's all right then. Those comments are fine. So. Yeah.
And the fact that you'd need to design a test which actually looks at the thoughts and intentions of the heart, like you actually have to build windows into people's souls to then prosecute a crime. I mean, that's what for me is so dangerous about hate crime stuff. Like, are there crimes that are motivated by racism, homophobia, and the rest of it? Yes, there are. But can you establish in a court of law that is what was motivating the person? And to do that, you've got to have some kind of like 1960s sci-fi, motivometer that goes on someone's head and somehow pieces together the intensity.
And I was watching a clip yesterday of a news anchor talking to a lady about these issues on campuses in America. Who should be allowed to come and speak, and he was kind of saying, the view that was coming from the campuses was that certain people shouldn't be allowed to come and speak. And he was saying, that's kind of a censorship thing. How do you decide, when it moves from debate? Because they were saying, we want debate, but when does it move from debate into hate speech? Right. And basically, as he tried to push this lady, she was saying, well, I think all reasonable people know, what is, reasonable things to say, reasonable people. And he was like, well, how do you establish that? Right. And she kept trying to dodge it, and of course she never really answered it. But that's the difficulty, isn't it? Like, who gets to decide at what point it's no longer just a debate about ideas, and actually what you're saying is coming from a place of hate to create hate? Yeah. How do you know that? And especially because the criteria by which you're going to assess that is like shifting sands. That we're going to get onto this in a little second about people watching old episodes of TV shows and how looking through the lenses of 2018 at shows that are a quarter of a century old, all of a sudden that's hateful and that's unacceptable, and yet we're using this criteria that's just unearthed. And and how do you stop that from being mob rule? How do you stop that from being, well, most of my friends think that's unacceptable? Well, maybe most of your friends are wrong. Who knows? So it's just interesting to me that this issue of Trump, like whether it's unacceptable or not, is based on whether it's racist or not. And I think we could just conclude it's unacceptable already. I don't think we need to use that. I think that's fair.
But I think there is this holy trinity of moral judgments to do with race, gender, and sexuality, and that's the holy trinity. And if you transgress against those three, and only three, kind of whatever you want to say, protected categories, then you are worse than Hitler. And if you don't, I guess you're okay. And it's just such a narrow way of looking at the world. And another reason I started thinking about this was because of an article about Friends that surfaced in the Metro, and then on BBC News they referenced this article in the Metro, and it's all about people who are fans of Friends rewatching the episodes.
It's because it's just come on Netflix, isn't it? That's the thing. The whole everything's now there, so everyone suddenly on my social media, people are like, "Friends is on Netflix. We can start watching it again." Yeah, and everyone was really excited.
And that was you, right? You are both a fan.
And we'd actually already started watching it on DVD because
Yeah.
We had the DVDs, and it was before that, so we
Yeah.
were just... That's a DVD, a digital
Yeah.
versatile disc.
They're still in charity shops in VHS, aren't they?
Yeah.
The VHS section is just flooded with Dan Brown books and Friends on VHS.
Yeah, the kids are saying, those are the ones you put on the spinning thing, you put the needle on it. Like...
It crackles for a bit. Yeah. So you've been rewatching. How does Friends stack up?
Well, you know what? I mean, obviously, it's dated in the sense that you look at it and you go, wow, like, check out those 90s haircuts and cracking attire. And you know what? Largely, you know, we've enjoyed it just as much as we have before. There was just one... I mean, there were one or two episodes, or not even whole episodes, but just parts, where I just thought to myself, oh, that wouldn't get in today.
Yeah.
And there were jokes where I thought, you know, the butt of the joke here is, you know, insinuating Chandler might be gay or something like that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and I just thought, oh, that would never happen today.
Yeah.
But I didn't look at that and think to myself, oh man, I'm morally outraged.
Yeah.
We must, you know, burn every episode of Friends, and we should get Matthew Perry up and
Yes.
crucify him.
Answer for crimes
And
against humanity.
everyone who was involved in Friends.
In the BBC article, they cited this tweet. This woman tweeted out, "There is nothing I hate more than Ross." She didn't need to finish the tweet at that point.
I like Ross. I am a Ross apologist. I think Ross is great.
Wow, that's weird. Yeah, I mean, he's not the worst character. I mean, Chandler kind of is just... He's so
Joey
unlikable.
is the worst character.
Right.
Joey is just like, meh.
Yeah, two-dimensional. He was the one who got the spin-off, right? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, but where did that go?
Yeah. But why didn't Ross get a spin-off? Wow. That's, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, neither did any of the other five.
Oh, did Phoebe try and get a... Was there a Phoebe spin-off?
I don't think so.
No. Okay.
No.
Just Joey. I guess because he's the most two-dimensional character, and it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing around him. So you can rebuild a world around Joey just by himself.
There's not a lot of story. Like, if I think about it, there's not a huge amount of stories that revolve around Joey. You know, like big arcs of Joey. You know, he's just there.
Well, they put him together with Rachel just because.
For a bit.
I don't know.
No.
It's just like we were bored.
Gotta do something.
Kids with toys. Like, let's put these two together.
7 seasons in, gotta do something.
Anyway, this woman's tweet. She said, "There is nothing I hate more than Ross in the male nanny episode of Friends. He is, caps lock, so sexist and homophobic, and I just want to jump into the TV and strangle him." And what's interesting is I just want to jump into the TV and strangle him on every episode. but it's just like our spidey senses are just prick up at sexist, homophobic. And it's just like it's transgressing this holy trinity of sex, gender, and race.
And we were saying earlier, you know, there's plenty of other things in Friends which we could look at and go, those things are slightly morally
Right.
reprehensible or wrong or dubious.
Right.
But there's no outcry over...
There was.
Things.
From Christians, there was at the time. Like,
There's always outcry from Christians. It doesn't matter what's going on. Like, if someone made a film of the Bible, Christians would be outraged.
Yeah,
like,
that's not a hypothetical.
If it was an accurate depiction of the Bible, people would say there's too much violence, too much sex, it's awful.
Yeah. Christians are the
and they prefer
worst.
the book.
Yeah, I prefer the book. Well, I would hope they do. But, yeah, I mean... What was I going to say? I don't know. Something about
people being outraged. Christians were outraged.
Christians were outraged at the time because it was normalising hookup culture.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the moral framework. That if you're in the 90s and you're watching Friends, you're worried about this is normalising hookup culture.
Yeah.
And you know, poor Ross, he's like divorced 3 times. You know, by the time he's in his mid-30s.
And I said about we were watching the episode. My wife and I, where Phoebe has kind of 2 guys on the go the whole time, and they don't know about each other, and she's kind of like, who should I stay with? But but very much in a kind of both at the same time going on. It's not a kind of I'll pick one and then.
Yes.
And I remember I was just sitting through that episode thinking like, what an awful person, Phoebe, you are to do that to somebody, you know. But no one's going to bat an eyelid in society about that kind of thing. Right. I mean, although if we all experienced it today, if we found out that was happening to us.
Yes.
We'd think it was awful.
Yeah, exactly.
But it doesn't tick the racist, homophobic, sexist.
Right.
But
if we laugh at Chandler for being effeminate, hang on, that does offend against the Holy Trinity, and so yeah. So I don't know. Have you guys been watching Friends on Netflix? Do you think it holds up? Are you with Ross?
Could it be any more homophobic?
Yeah, so that's what we think about Friends. And today we're also thinking about post-truth. So this is the video that we released yesterday, post-truth. But something that's sort of come up in the news recently that kind of reminds us of the post-truth incident is Oprah for president.
Yeah.
Oprah Winfrey giving her great speech at the Golden Globes. And as she was giving it, people were already making predictions that Oprah for 2020, and she will go head-to-head with Trump. Like, what a prospect. Isn't it a delicious prospect for all those who don't have to then live in the country in which those two are going head-to-head?
My word. It's shocking, really, isn't it? I mean, a lot of the complaint about Trump. I mean, there's been a lot of complaints about Trump. Yeah. But there's so much about, he's completely inexperienced. He's got no experience of actually leading a country. I mean, obviously not leading a country anyway. Who has? But he's got no political experience or anything like that. And basically, he's just a celebrity. Yeah. Pushed into a position. Celebrity billionaire. Yeah. And people are going, isn't it terrible? Yeah. What's the answer? Let's get another celebrity billionaire with no experience in politics in any way, shape or form and make them our president. Yeah.
She's nicer, though. Let's be honest.
She's a woman.
Right.
And
black.
Yeah, and so black. She's ticking a lot of boxes for that side there.
But isn't that interesting? That qualifies her as being diverse, even though, like, in a sense, she's another celebrity billionaire. Made her fortune on TV, and part of this celebrity.
She has
culture.
a lot in common with Donald Trump.
She's got a lot in
that way.
Common.
Yeah,
but when you just view it through gender and race, you're like, she's the polar opposite.
And but that's what we're saying, isn't it? That it's so interesting that in our society or in Western society today, that's the criteria. Yeah. The criteria for diversity is gender, race, sexuality. Yeah. And nothing else. Yeah,
which is interesting. So yesterday was Martin Luther King Day, so the second Monday in January. And, one of the most famous things that Martin Luther King said was, he had a dream that, his kids would be judged not by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character. Yeah. And what's fascinating about all this identity politics is that it gets sort of stirred up to the point where actually the colour of my skin becomes more important than the content of my character. And suddenly, my race, whether I'm white, black, or whatever, suddenly starts to either qualify me or disqualify me because of certain identity politics. And you just would wonder, isn't Martin Luther King, spinning in his grave saying, no, it's about the content of your character? And who knows what Oprah thinks about, policy issues? Who knows what Trump thinks about certain policy issues? He was a Democrat for a lot of his life. Who knows?
We were saying earlier, it just feels like, I said, my irony meter has exploded. It probably is. It sounds controversial to say, doesn't it? But, talking about that stuff with Martin Luther King, we know it would be terrible, definitely wrong to say, because someone is of a certain race or gender, therefore they must be like X, Y, or Z. Yes. Whether that's good or bad. We wouldn't just say all people of one race are good or all people of one race are bad. We know that's wrong. We say actually it's about individuals. Ironically, where we are now, we're at a situation where you're just told, if you are, of course, white or
cisgendered white male, whatever.
Exactly. Then of course you are a part of the problem. Yeah. You are, you're the misogynistic part of the patriarchy, oppressor. Yeah. A sexual predator. All those things, almost by default. And you go, hang on a second, isn't that the very thing? Yeah. Aren't you just doing the very thing?
You're playing the race card, and you're.
Yeah. Is it possible that there are white men who are not like that? Is it possible that there are black men who are not like that, and some who are, and white men who are and aren't? You know, that actually. Yeah. The colour of my skin or my gender might not have anything to do with the way I treat other people. Right. Like, I might, maybe I'm an awful human being. Yeah, maybe but maybe it's not because I'm a bloke. Or not because I'm white.
Paul, there are all sorts of reasons why you're a terrible human being.
Comments below.
Why is Paul such a dreadful specimen of humanity? Do comment on that. I'd love to read out why you think it's the case, because I've got theories of my own, but I just want to see if they're coming across.
Yeah, absolutely.
To you, we asked on Facebook, what would be the UK equivalent of Oprah versus Trump? And my suggestion was Katie Hopkins versus Lily Allen. Like, imagine that going head to head. We had some others.
So what we got here, we've got Milo Yiannopoulos versus Owen Jones.
Yeah.
Man, that would be a real...
I'm watching with the popcorn.
Oh, man. Yeah. Oh, it'd be a lot of fun.
I would not want to live in the country. I was then left to these two.
As a hypothetical.
As a hypothetical. It's funny. Lord Sugar versus Judy Finnegan.
I do like Jeremy Clarkson versus Trisha Goddard. Like,
Nick Griffin, a politician already, but versus Esther Ranson. Yeah. I think my favourite is Katie Hopkins versus Des O'Connor.
Yeah. I mean, just putting aside the fact, I think Des O'Connor might be dead.
Yeah.
Like, but to be honest,
hypotheticals.
He would probably still be better than Katie Hopkins.
Yeah.
No.
But I think Piers Morgan versus J.K. Rowling. I think actually that does capture something of J.K. Rowling as the British Oprah. I think that might capture something of...
Because that was the thing, when we were talking about this, I was struggling to think who the figure is.
Yeah.
You know, because Katie Hopkins was the one who came to mind very much on the kind of Trump-esque character.
Yes.
That seemed quite easy. It was more difficult to find a single figure who you go, they're very much like... But yeah, J.K. now you say that...
Especially because she's kind of got this rags to riches story.
Yeah.
Very successful businesswoman now. She got a big break. She's brilliant at what she does.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a voice on Twitter, you know, standing up for the little guy and that sort of thing.
Yep.
You know.
Mm.
So maybe Katie Hopkins versus J.K. Rowling.
Mm.
For British listeners and viewers, this is what we're thinking about.
Yeah,
like,
the next general election.
So pray for America, because that's what they're having to, you know, cope with.
And I think as well, it's just worth clarifying off our discussion,
Yes.
you know, we're not taking sides on either of these.
No.
We're literally, we find both sides completely absurd. It's the absurdity of both arguments.
We don't only think that 50% of this list is dreadful. We think 100%.
Everything's just hilarious.
We were talking about Oprah Winfrey making her
Truth.
statement about the one thing that she knows is that telling your own story is the most powerful tool. Telling your truth.
Your truth.
Which is interesting. If she'd said telling your own story...
And we said, didn't we, that if you're listening to that, maybe if you're being generous, the question is, what did she really mean?
Yeah.
You know, did she mean telling your own story is the most powerful thing you can do? Which, of course, it's very powerful.
It's one of the most powerful things, yeah.
So, you know, speaking your truth could mean something else.
Yes.
Potentially.
Yes.
So what does it mean? And we were discussing, therefore, you know, let's imagine 2020, we get it's Trump versus Oprah.
Yes.
And we know about Trump and his alternative facts.
Alternative facts.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What happens, therefore, when Trump brings his truth, starts speaking his truth against Oprah's truth?
Yeah.
Where's the truth?
Where's the truth?
Whose is the truth in that?
Is it just the person who speaks loudly? Well, more loudly.
Well, this is pushing into the territory of our video, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
hopefully you've seen our video. If not, it's on the Speak Life Facebook page, Speak Life UK. And in that video, we talk about post-truth, and we talk about some issues to do with post-truth. It was the word of the year in 2016. Was that the Oxford English Dictionary?
I think it was, yep.
Claims it's the word of the year.
We said, didn't we, it's actually 2 words.
It's actually 2 words.
And then actually last year, I think it was last year, or whether they'd chosen it for this year, fake news was the word of the year.
You're fake news.
Fake news. Again,
You're fake news. Yeah.
I kind of feel that if you work for a dictionary...
Yeah, you should
be aware that fake news is actually 2 words.
Is it? Is a hyphenated word, one word, or 2 words? Tell us in comments below.
You can't just stick a hyphen between every phrase you like and call it one word.
Well, the Germans don't even bother with the hyphen. They just put them all together like 300 letters long. We've got Harriet Glendenning saying, we can hear you. Hello. Thank you, Harriet. Neil says, hello from Jakarta, Indonesia. Can hear us okay. That's good. Eudora, writing from Singapore, can hear us. What an age we live in.
And Sarah says hi as well.
Hello. Hi, Sarah. Didn't want to leave you out.
Yeah.
This we could just read out hello to people. I don't know how long you've got, but we want to keep this within a lunch hour. This is kind of the idea on a Tuesday, is that we have a working lunch together, and maybe you can eat your lunch at your desk. I've been eating my lunch at my desk, some yummy sandwiches, and discuss what's new, what's news, and discuss our videos.
And we're going to aim to try and get started at 1 each week. Like I said, we've just had some technical issues this week, so apologies if you were there at 1, ready and waiting, and apologies if you've been cut off in the middle.
Yeah.
But hopefully if you're sitting down, the idea is hopefully you're sitting down for lunch, either at home or at work, maybe. You can tune in.
Just like this. Do you see what I'm doing?
Exactly.
My wife made me this. Very good. Thank you, Emma. So our video that went out there yesterday evening, post-truth, we went through 6 different points, and because our technology has now reconfigured, I've got to now remember it using the powers of my mind.
As well.
Oh, here it is. Okay. So number 1 issue with post-truth is that it is contradictory. To say it is true that we are now post-truth is to violate the truth of post-truth, right?
Yeah, I mean, to say all things are relative,
right.
So...
including the statement, all things are relative?
Well, exactly, yeah. That's the problem. To say everything is relative is an absolute statement in itself, isn't it?
And
unless...
only Siths deal in absolutes.
Only the bad people
use
absolutes. And actually, that's very much what I came up against when we were at the Mind, Body and Soul Convention, which, for those of you who won't be aware of it, is kind of a spiritual... fair kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a big convention.
It's
a show. I think they called it a show.
We were at a stall on it. It wasn't a Speak Life stand. It was with Lumina Ministries. If you do the podcast, you might have picked up on George Osborne. They're not the politician George Osborne,
yes.
A different one. We were on a stand with him, so we were a Christian stand in the midst of a whole wealth of other things, from Reiki healing and there was all kinds of stuff, wasn't there?
So
yoga things, and all kinds of spiritualities, basically. And we were just having chats with people, and one of the big things I came up against time and time again was people saying, "Oh, well, I think that all religions or all kind of spiritualities are all equal and valid." And the problem was, as you tried to say, well, but what about where people contradict each other? And people don't want to deal with that. They don't want to deal with any facts.
Right.
They just want to say, no, everything's good and valid. Interestingly, the one thing that they don't seem to think is valid is the Christian view that Jesus is the only way to God.
Right.
That will come out in the conversation. They say, so you saying that Jesus is the only way?
Right.
I say, well, yeah, I think that's what Jesus says. And they say, oh, well, I don't agree with that. And I go, well, hang on a second, a minute ago, you told me that that's my truth. Yeah. But that doesn't work in that setting. So actually, when you push back against relativism, you find there's always something underneath it that they see as an absolute.
Yes.
And that's a thing to push for, isn't it, I think, when you're chatting to people.
Yeah. And so point number 1, it's contradictory. You're sawing off the leg of the tree that you're sitting on. Point 2, it's impractical. Nobody lives like this, actually. When you go to the pharmacist and, they say, would you like the blue pills that your doctor has prescribed? You don't then say, actually, purple's more my colour, so the pharmacist does not then say, hey, it's a free world.
Yeah, or if we had a serious illness,
right,
we wouldn't say, oh, well, I'm actually a big proponent of, leeches.
Yes.
I think a bit of good bleeding is going to get rid of the illness. None of us would say, oh, well, that's your truth, and that's equally valid. We'd say, that's crazy.
There are tests that you can do. There is a truth standard above here that would arbitrate about whether surgery or pills or leeches was going to be a good course of action for you. So there is this truth. So it's impractical. It doesn't, So in medicine, you can think about examples. What's another example of?
We talked a bit. I think you got left on the cutting room floor. But in planning, we talked a bit about courtrooms.
Yes.
So I mean, can you imagine if in court, if the criteria wasn't what the truth was, but actually just what people felt was the truth.
Yeah.
If someone said, well, all the evidence shows that this person can't have committed this crime. They've got an ironclad alibi, whatever it is. If a jury member then turned around and said, yeah, but I kind of feel he looks a bit guilty. He looks a bit dodgy.
Right.
To me,
I
feel he might be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a recipe for chaos if you go down that way. And people will say, well, that's just, going to absurd lengths.
But it's not, because, I mean, there is a real danger within the criminal justice system that things like evidence and the facts can play second fiddle to, is this person a minority? Are they a victim? Are they from a protected class? And it does get very messy at times. There are totally miscarriages of justice because somebody is from a minority and the jurors, convict a certain minority because they look at them through prejudiced eyes. But then there's the backlash against that then makes certain minorities into protected classes, and then it becomes a political battle about, how we should view the evidence and how we should view people quite apart from the fact of the evidence. And so, I don't think it's a hypothetical to say that injected within the criminal justice system, you get to the point where ideology and identity politics starts to interfere when it should just be a cold, hard examination of the evidence. So there's one example. Another example, I think, is in academia. So Steven Pinker, back in December, was on a panel discussing whether the reason why Donald Trump, we just can't stop talking about him, it's the whole world can't stop talking about this guy. So they were saying, why was he elected? Was it because of political correctness and people just getting sick and tired of political correctness? And they think, well, here's a blunt instrument that's just going to smash that to pieces, which I guess he is. And Steven Pinker, who is definitely a man of the left, his TED Talks have been watched millions and millions of times, 10 New York Times bestsellers. But he started to say, well, look, here are some things that it's impolitic to study at an academic level. Things like, do men and women have different interests and priorities when it comes to the home work balance? Do they, and you're almost not allowed to press into those details because you're committed to gender equality and I'm committed to gender equality.
And his point was that the facts show that, don't they? That studies, he talked about the kind of the tests they get given in school to determine, what job might you go on to, what would you like to do with your life? And they said, obviously they've been given to millions of people over the years, and just the data shows that men and women choose different things.
Right.
And he's saying it's just a cold, hard fact.
Yeah, but it's dangerous,
But
man.
you're not allowed to say that.
So
because people, if you say that, it doesn't matter what the facts are.
Yeah.
Well, it's going back to our 3 criteria, isn't it?
Right.
Is it racist? Is it homophobic? Is it sexist?
Yeah.
And people just leap on it and say, hang on a sec, you're saying men and women are different.
Yeah.
That is sexist.
Yeah.
Despite what the facts might say.
And are you allowed to notice, one of the other facts he said, are you allowed to notice the fact that globally international terrorism is overwhelmingly committed by Muslims in the name of Islam? Or in the name of a version of Islam, or however you want to phrase it. But are you even allowed to name that truth? And that becomes a very difficult truth to name because, I've often spoken against the ideology, the philosophy, the theology of Islam, which I think is both incorrect and damaging. But it's very easy for anyone who speaks against Islam to then be categorized as racist. And you think, well, what's race has got nothing to do with what I'm thinking about in these issues.
And I think as well, it's a way to shut down conversation. I find that if you don't want to engage with people's points, it's just very simple, isn't it, to say, oh, you're a racist.
Yeah.
And therefore I don't have to engage with your points.
Yeah.
Regardless.
But what's infuriating about that is that the race issue is like galaxies away from where I'm thinking. Like I'm thinking about a theological heresy called Islam that is a brand of Aryanism, that is a kind of subordinationism. And then somebody over there is saying, yeah, but it's because you hate brown people. Like, what? Like, A, how would you look into my heart and never know that? B, why would that have anything to do with the ideology and the philosophy of Islam? And C, Muhammad was famously white. Like again and again, the Hadith keep talking about him being the whitest of white prophets who held black slaves. So why are we protecting that guy from criticism? Anyway, but so I think Islam is another area where it shows that people are not interested in discussing the ideology and in discussing the ideas, but it very quickly becomes a way of simply shutting down discourse because, okay, it must be a racist issue. Islam is not a race, people. But anyway, so those are the first two things. It contradicts itself. It's impractical. The third reason why I think post-truth is such a disaster is because then power becomes king. So the example that's given in the video is if you've got within the playground a referee that's called Truth, and Truth gets to referee all the disputes that go on in the playground, then you've got something to appeal to and you've got some sense of order. But if you get rid of this referee called Truth, what's going to happen in the playground? The bully is going to rule. Whoever is biggest, whoever can shout loudest, is going to win the day. And that's increasingly what we're seeing. And people are having to get louder and louder and louder to get heard in this world. And the outrage gets more and more and more. And you see this with Trump and not Trump. These two ever louder voices in the echo chamber that just go back and forth and back and forth. Because if you sack off Truth, then you've got to be big, you've got to be powerful.
Yeah.
And, there was an email I got just this morning about our video yesterday evening. He said he always cringes when issues of equality start to be spoken of in terms of empowerment. And we all know what people are talking about when they talk about, if there's a voiceless person, we want to give them a voice. If there's a powerless person, we want to give them power. And yet when things are framed in terms of power, it can so easily become a punch-up between two forces that we want to give equal weight to. But two forces that are adversarial giving, that's called war. The whole beauty of having free speech and the whole beauty of truth being an arbiter that stands above me and you means that we don't have to resort to war. We don't have to, resort to violence in order to settle our disputes. There is an arbiter. Its name is truth. So that's number 3. Power becomes king when you sack off truth. And then I loved, your bit in this video, Paul. You said the problem with post-truth is me.
Yeah.
Because I've been blaming you for many years. This whole post-truth.
Yeah, so we were talking about how actually we might say, I want the truth and we have a desire for truth, but actually we twist the truth as well to kind of fit our own ends, don't we? And we use the illustration of the football managers having seen, a controversial penalty, one side scores and wins, the other side loses. Both football managers watch the footage, same thing, but actually one of them is saying, yes, that's a penalty. Other one's saying, no, it definitely wasn't. And it's because we want to back up our view, don't we, with, certain views.
Yeah.
And we talk about how actually, biblically, the prophets have named that a long time. Our hearts are deceptive, and even if you lay out the cold hard facts, we will want to take that and twist it to our own ends on the whole as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is me. The problem is the heart that is deceitful above all things and always self-justifying. So I always want to play. I never want there to be a judge in my life. I'm always playing the lawyer who's always trying to get me off the hook, And so who cares about the judgment of truth? I'm always trying to, protect myself. We had some great comments on the live video about, maybe men and women make different choices purely because of society has conditioned us to want these different things. And if we had a more equal society, then women would want the exact same things as men or very similar things to what men want. I would just say back to that actually Scandinavian countries where there is great equality between the sexes and perhaps more than in any other culture in the world that there's ever been, are some of the most marked differences in career aspirations that we see in some of the psychological literature. So that's just an interesting counterpoint. Love to hear what you think more. Love to hear more of what you think in the comments on that one.
And I think, that's when we come back to, how do we decide, is it just culturally conditioned or not?
Right.
And for me, I think I would look to my authority of Scripture.
Right.
And say I think Scripture points to differences, not inequality,
right,
but differences, which means I'm not surprised, therefore, when I see data that says men and women make different choices, because I think that seems to tie up, for me at least, with what's my biblical authority. But I think as well, sometimes we say, men and women are no different. Some people will say men and women are exactly the same, regardless. But yet at the same time, people will say we need to get a woman into this position because she'll really change things.
Right.
You know, well, surely her gender won't make any difference if
Right.
men and women are exactly the same.
Yes.
I think it's because we do know men and women are different, but
Yeah.
we think it's good to have women involved in
Yes.
areas and men. You know,
Yes.
just like, you know, there'll be
Yes.
men and women involved in different areas of ministry.
Yes.
Yeah, it's because we think we do bring valuable and different things.
Yeah. In a rich tapestry. Yes.
A rich tapestry. Yeah.
But that we're not interchangeable, so we're utterly equal and the same in terms of like value, but not interchangeable. You know, like the mother who says to all her children, "I love you all interchangeably," is not really expressing what she really means about things. She says, "I love you all equally," but she loves them all differently as well, and I think that's the kind of equality that we want, that actually honours distinction and difference. And I think a doctrine of the Trinity, and let's think more about this maybe one week, thinking about how a doctrine of the Trinity that affirms the equality of Father, Son and Spirit, even though there are distinct persons, might give us a model for thinking about how you could have utter equality, but also to honour the particular and the individual.
Maybe that's a question, thorny question to address, in some way. We'll try and put that into a good phrase.
Okay. Some people are losing the feed.
It did say at our end that it had dipped out, but it said it had reconnected, so...
We're back. And we're in the home stretch as well, because, oh my goodness, it's nearly 2:00. And so let's just finish off our thoughts about this post-truth video. At the end, we say that even though the problem is me with truth, and I'm always self-justifying, nonetheless, even though we walk away from truth, truth comes to find us. And isn't it beautiful that Jesus calls himself the truth? And he says, because I tell you the truth, you don't believe me, which is like a stunning indictment of the human race. Because Jesus tells us the truth, we don't want to believe him. We are anti-truth, really, at our core. But nonetheless, he then says, if the Son sets you free, you'll be free indeed. So he is the truth that comes not just to judge us, but to actually bring us into bonds of love. His truth does judge us as anti-truth and post-truth, but it is also a truth that reconciles us, so that we can stand in his presence as those who are self-justifying fools, and yet we are loved anyway. And then he says, okay, now Glenn, now run along into the world, and in my truth, which is the absolute truth, in my truth, Jesus is the one person who can really say that, in my truth, I want you to walk into the world. And now, because I've been loved by a truth that justifies me, I don't need to justify myself, I don't need to hide, I don't need to wear a mask, I don't need to twist the truth. I can now walk in the truth, and the truth will set me free.
Absolutely.
How about that?
Yeah.
Well, like I say, it's 2:00, so let's call it a day, draw stumps, and we'll have a look at some of these technical issues, and we will be back here again next Tuesday, and it will all work just perfectly. Absolutely.
And we appreciate you sticking with us through the issues, and for chipping in as well, because it's good to discuss what's going on, and for people to come back and forth and stuff. We'll do the best we can to respond to bits and bobs.
Yes.
So thank you to those of you who chipped in.
And let's keep the discussion happening in the comments. If you missed the first part of our video, there'll be another live video on the Speak Life UK Facebook page. So the first half of our discussion will be there. You can have a look at it there. Do like our Facebook page there, and you'll get all our videos. And stay tuned for our podcast, which will be the audio of today. And that goes out every Friday, the Speak Life podcast. Search for it wherever you get podcasts.
And did we say we're going to be back next week? What we're back with?
Oh, yeah.
Said? Yeah, so we've got, if you thought any of what we talked about today was a hot topic, the next 2 weeks, actually we've got 2 videos coming out to do with sex, sexuality.
Yes.
Two
sex videos coming up.
2 sex videos coming from us. This is I'm not selling this well.
That didn't help.
They're going to be very informative.
So the first one is going to be why are Christians so weird on the subject of sex, and then the second one will be why does God care about our sex lives?
Yeah. And so, we'd really appreciate you chipping in on those ones as well, and hopefully that'll have kind of whetted your appetite to be back next week as well.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining us, and see you next week.
Take care.